Hello, hello, and welcome to Digital Marketing This Week. It's episode 40. This is a marketer's guide to conversions. Of course, brought to you by Seriously Simple Marketing over at seriouslysimplemarketing.com. My name is Chris Mercer, all about analytics optimization, content development, the host, of course, of Digital Marketing This Week. And I just go by Mercer, so feel free to just call me Mercer. Okay, this week's focus topic is all about conversions. Now, before we go too much further, I do want to remind those of you who are watching this on a podcast or a little bit pre-recorded, maybe on YouTube or something like that, we do have an Insiders Club, and that's kind of where we, at the end of the content portion of the show, we sort of jump off the virtual stage and can have a little Q&A session with everybody. Go over whatever challenges they happen to be running into in their own business. It doesn't always relate to the topic at hand, but a lot of times it does. And it's completely free. So you can join us at seriouslysimplemarketing.com. You'll see a little place to sign up there. And you'll also get notifications of when Digital Marketing This Week is, so that you can actually join us live for the Insiders Club. And even if you can't join us live every week, it's not a big deal because you have a chance to ask questions anyway, and then we can send you out a recording with all of those as well. Again, completely free service that we offer for you. Your goal for today, as always, is to get one idea, to act on that one idea, and then to make sure that you repeat the process. And conversions, like all other things, there's a lot to it. So as much as we've tried to simplify it with what we're about to cover here, and hopefully we are going to make it simple, seriously simple, you might say, but we do want to make sure that you just take that one little tidbit of information, practice that, make it your own, and then go back, watch this again, get another idea, and sort of iterate from there, because that's really what's going to push your business forward, is actually making progress on something rather than learning about a whole bunch of stuff and never actually putting anything into action and practice. All right, so why should you care about today's episode? Well, because today on the show, we're going to talk about a framework that you can use when it comes to conversions, and ideally to improve your conversions. We're going to talk about some ideas of where you can start and give you some low-hanging fruit of some things that you should be checking kind of from the start. So kind of the easier things, and hopefully you'll pick up another trick or two. All right, so let's jump into it without further ado. A marketer's guide to conversions. Now, on the slide, we actually put a little genie, you know, with money coming out everywhere. That's what everybody thinks conversions is. Everyone thinks, oh, okay, well, just tell me what converts, and then we'll do that. And it's, man, if it was that easy, we would charge a whole lot more money than we charge for this. So conversions isn't about the right answer, right? It's not about like, oh, just use orange buttons because orange buttons is what converts, or just put this magic word in your headline and your headline will all of a sudden boost it, or use this particular layout for your opt-in page and your opt-in page will automatically double its conversions. It's not about that. Conversion is a process, right? So conversion, it's all about the process. It's all about learning, and it's obviously directly related to split testing. We talked about split testing in a previous episode of DMTW, and split testing, again, it's a process. It's a process of learning to speak your market's language, is what we talked about. And conversions is obviously a cousin, like a first cousin. It's directly related to that. So this is all about learning, and it's important that you think about it in terms of a process. So yes, you are ultimately trying to improve your conversions for sure, but you've got to learn something as you're going through and doing this, because if you're not learning anything, if you're not learning to speak your market's language as you go through this process, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. Like at the end of the day, yeah, you might get a little successful and you might accidentally guess right and decide that, you know, the orange button works, or the Belcher button with a little border around it, a red dash border, happens to work. But if you don't have an idea as to why these things are working, right, as to why you're actually trying them in the first place, again, you're missing out on this huge opportunity to learn, because everything that you learn as you go through this will help you make that next sort of educated guess even better and more on target. So that's why it's, again, important to learn as you go through this process. Now, every split tester, every conversions optimizer, all of these, if you're in this business, you have a framework, right? And everyone talks about their framework, and to be honest, everybody creates their own framework, and in my view, they're essentially the same. They're all the same. There is just one giant framework, in my opinion. So that's kind of what we do, and everything that's out there is sort of an offshoot or a different way to say this, right? So when you think about a conversions framework, all it really means is, how are you going to look at your landing page or your opt-in page or your copy or your video or whatever it is that you're trying to improve conversions on? How are you going to look at this? Through what set of eyes are you going to look at it, right? So through what set of lenses are you going to look at it? That's all this is about. And this is why I look at it. And when I think about it like this. This is actually a picture of a little guy with some 3D glasses on. And the reason we have that, I think this is a really good image, is because for us, right, we look at it through two specific lenses, right? So like the old style 1950s 3D glasses, they had the blue film and then they had the red film, and that was sort of what created the 3D effects. You can get an overall view of something that resembled 3D, or at least close to it. And it's kind of the same thing with your conversions. So we look at it through one particular direction, through one particular lens, right? And gives it kind of a different slant. And then we look at that same page through a different lens and gives it a different slant, right? So we can learn those, or that's our framework. And really what it comes down to is pain versus pleasure. And as you learn, or if you research different people and their frameworks and the models that they use to improve conversions, you will find they all pretty much come down to this: pain versus pleasure. Human beings, as a species, we like to avoid pain. Imagine that, right? We like to avoid pain. We spend our lives trying to avoid pain and simultaneously running toward pleasure, right? And everyone's motivated on a slightly different scale. Some people are extremely motivated just to avoid pain. Some people are at the opposite side, extremely motivated just to gain pleasure. And most of us are somewhere in the middle, right? And it's sort of a sliding scale between those two. But essentially, that's all there is, right? Avoiding pain and gaining pleasure. That's what we look for. So that's the framework that we use. So let's talk about that. How do we reduce pain, right? How do we avoid pain? Well, things we basically look for when we're coming through that sort of pain lens, we'll look at a page and we'll look for things that could cause anxiety or that might startle a particular user. So as they're going through the page, if you see something that all of a sudden maybe even might raise an objection, right? Maybe there's a copy point and it mentions, you know, how it's a simple 77-step process, you know, to go through whatever it is this person's selling. You're like, wow, 77 steps, like that could be startling. All right, that could be something that causes some anxiety. That could cause people to think, do I really have time to go through 77 steps? Like, that's a lot. So maybe we test reducing that to help reduce some of the anxiety that might be created. Other things that could be causing anxiety would be things like security symbols, right? So like if you don't have a guarantee, a badge that says, hey, we've got a 30-day guarantee or a 60-day guarantee, if you don't have something that's got something that shows that your site is secure, especially around the credit card, right? When that credit card is being asked for and those numbers are being asked for, do you have something that reminds people that, yes, it is okay for you to give us our credit card information because we keep it safe? Even around opt-ins, right? And this is kind of a really good one to test if you haven't already, is on your opt-in form, right? Are you mentioning the word spam? Like, hey, and this is sort of default. A lot of opt-in forms do this. They say by default, hey, we're not going to spam you. Well, spam is an anxiety word that causes anxiety, because for me to tell you I'm not going to, it's okay to give me your email, you know, it's okay for you to give me your email because I'm not going to spam you. Well, in order for you to process that phrase, right? And I know this sounds sort of very sort of subconscious, but it is. So much of this is subconscious oriented. In order for me to understand that phrase, that you will not spam me, I have to think about you spamming me. Right? I have to process that in my brain. My brain has to go through that to know what spamming is and then go, okay, well, that's not going to happen. But it first causes me to think about spam. Why would you want me to think about spam when I'm at an opt-in form, right? At all. When would you don't want me anywhere near that. So instead you can say like, hey, we keep your information safe, or we keep it private if that's what you do. I mean, all that sort of stuff, right? So your privacy is important to us, something generic like that. Still sort of emphasizes the fact that, hey, you know, we're not going to spam you, but it doesn't say anything about spam. Right? So these are the things that you look for when you're looking for reducing pain. This is all about the confusion, or sorry, it's all about startling, anxiety, that sort of stuff. Next, let's talk about confusion, right? So is there, or are there things, and normally it's multiple things, that might be confusing to somebody, right? Causing them to be confused. So let's say if you go to a page, and we'll talk about this a little later, but let's talk about congruency, because this is a big one that confuses people. Let's say you have an ad that says, click here to get our free guide, right? And then you go to the page, the landing page, and the landing page doesn't mention the free guide at all, right? Or it's not immediately apparent what they need to do to get the free guide. That's a huge one. A lot of times there'll be something that might even say, there's a button that might say, you know, download guide or download now, something like that. Then there's another button later in the page that says get started. Then there's another button that says request your guide. You know, and I've seen this a lot. A lot of people do this. They'll put these different call to actions on different buttons. Well, there's confusion. Which one do you want me to do? Right? Am I going to get the same thing from each one of those? You know, or and why might there be other calls to action? Are there different things that could happen? And if any of that's happening inside the person's head, if any of that isn't clear, if there's any possible confusion, then you're going to have issues. You're going to have a lower conversion rate, right? Because it's causing pain, it's causing anxiety, it's causing, again, that confusion, that uncertainty. All of that is negative, right? And remember, we want to avoid the negative. We want to run toward the positive, right? Avoid pain, run toward pleasure. That's all we're doing here. So when you look at the page, when you look at your opt-in again, or your landing page, or your VSL, think about it in terms of this avoiding pain around confusion, right? So is there something that could be potentially confusing? Are you using jargon that's probably perfectly fine in your industry, but that maybe your particular market, depending, maybe they're just starting out, right? So I use this a lot, but we talk about VSLs a lot. So a VSL is a video sales letter. And I have to constantly remind myself to say that over and over again, because I just assume everybody knows what a VSL is, because it's one of the first things that you learn. But there's a lot of people who are starting out that come to these webinars and the seminars, and that they don't know what a VSL is yet. They're just starting out, so why would they? Right? It makes perfect sense. So I have to remind myself, if I was going to do an opt-in form that says, hey, here's how to improve your VSL. A lot of people would know that, but a lot of people won't know what VSL is. So I got to make sure that I put video sales letters, right? So again, ways to reduce confusion. Something else we can talk about is distraction, right? So distraction. So are there different things? Let's go back to call to actions for a moment, because we see this a lot. There will be on the page itself, it might say like, click here to download your guide, right? And then later on the page, or someplace even right near it, might say, click to request your free consultation, right? So it's two different, completely different offers, two different calls to action. Which one do you want me to do? We see that a lot. Think about it in an email. So some of the emails you get, most emails are probably very focused. So it's like, hey, here's your one action to take. Here's the one link I want you to click on. But some other emails might have like 3 or 4 different things that they want you to do. So it's like, oh, hey, you can go ahead and click here to buy this, or reply back to me and let me know if you have any questions, or if you're interested in having a consultation with me, click here, right? So it's like 3 different things you want me to do. I can't do 3 different things. There's distraction. So I now have options to choose from. Options can be dangerous. Options should be very, very limited, right? You want to make sure you've got a lot of focus here. So options should be very, very limited. There's actually a famous study that they talked about, I believe it was jams. And at a grocery store, they did a little study where they had 8 different jams set out and people could try different samples. And they had another one where they had 40 different jams and people could try different samples. And on both, they got people to try lots of different samples. But the one that only had 8 different jams, right? The one that had fewer jams to choose from is the one that actually sold more. Because people, when they have so many different choices, when there's so much out there to process, it becomes distracting. And instead of making a wrong decision, because that would be painful, right? Remember, it all comes back to pain and pleasure. Instead of making a wrong decision, you'd much rather make no decision at all, because at least you know what that feels like, right? And sometimes no decision at all is better than making the wrong decision. So you're going to think about it. Okay, instead of choosing the wrong jam, right? I want to think about it to make sure I make the right choice. And lots of people are doing that to your pages all the time. So instead of signing up for whatever your offer is, or clicking through, or putting in their credit card information, they're going to think about it just to make sure. They're going to go do reviews check, right? And go check for reviews, see what other people are saying, or maybe ask their friends, or maybe check out the GNC to see if there's a supplement there that takes care of it. Because that way they know they can return it with GNC, and they may not know that they can return it with you. So things like that. All right, so again, reducing pain in terms of distraction. So is it very, very clear what you want somebody to do? Now let's talk about the pleasure, right? So this is the opposite end. This is the other lens. So we would come through the page, come through your opt-in. When this is when you're looking for the conversions, right? Looking to improve conversions. What are the ways that you can make this a more anxiety-free, right? A more confusion-free, a more distraction-free environment? Because all of those, when you're reducing those, you are simultaneously making it better. Right? So when you come through there and you say, okay, well, let's talk about your shopping cart, right? If you're looking at your shopping cart page, do you have symbols on there that have things that are very apparent, like a lock that just sort of screams, this is secure, right? Are you using a service like, maybe the McAfee or the Norton scanning services, that are available, or you see stuff like that? You should always test those, by the way. Doesn't mean you have to use those, but test that stuff. There's a lot of health supplement companies that use the Dr. Trusted logos. Those tend to work. But again, test it if that's your particular market. You always want to test it, because you never know when it will stop working, or if it'll work for you at all. But it's symbols like that, right? Is there a way to make your guarantee more apparent, right? To maybe eliminate the risk that might be associated with returns, right? And that could be simple things like changing the badging to make it more apparent. It could be things like, okay, yeah, you say it's easy to get, but how easy is it to get a refund, right? So it's like, oh, just simply email our support team at, and then put the email address in there, maybe something like that. So it's like, okay, well, they're not trying to hide it, right? I know how easy it's going to be to get a refund, so I don't have to worry about that. So those are the different things. So all of those make it a better experience for the user, right? It's promoting that pleasurable experience. It's not only is it reducing the anxiety, but it's actually making it easier, right? It's actually reducing the friction to purchase. Other things, talk about focus, right? So we got confusion, which is sort of the opposite end of this, where there's like all this different stuff, and okay, what does this mean? And you know, if I have to think for you, right? If I have to come up with reasons for you, or to try to interpret what it is you're trying to say to me, you're going to lose me. So how clear is it? How confusion free is it? How on target is your message, right? How congruent is everything? And then when we talked about distraction as a pain point, right? So all the different distracting elements, is there a clear path to follow? So do I have, if I come from, you know, a headline that's on an ad or some sort of whatever it is that's generating your traffic, if that says click here to download the guide, and then I go to a page that says, great, let's get started, download your guide here, right? That's congruent. There's a path to follow. It's clear what you want me to do. If there's 14 different call to actions, it's not. So make sure all the call to actions, all of your buttons are the same. You know, make sure that they all are promoting the same offer. Make sure that it's a very clear path to follow. And then if I have more questions, what should I do? Right? So can I scroll down the page? Is there an FAQ section? If I want to give you a call, can I? All that sort of stuff. Let's talk about some low-hanging fruit now. So one, and we've talked about some of these already, but just to reiterate, because I think this is the stuff that people miss. And again, I want to try to keep this as seriously simple as we can. Headlines. Are your headlines congruent to your ads? There are lots of ads out there where they get a click, but they go to a landing page that doesn't tie in directly with what that ad says. And if that's happening with you right now, that's something to go back and take a look at. Because if your ads are not 100% congruent, not kind of congruent, not basically the same if you look at it like this, 100% congruent. If they are not 100% congruent, you're missing out. You're hurting yourself unnecessarily. Does that mean that you should have a bunch of landing pages for a bunch of ads? Absolutely, that's what that means. If you're just relying on one landing page and you're sending all of your ads to this one landing page, you're setting yourself up for trouble. And if you are building out campaigns, make sure that you build them out with a chance to do different landing pages, because you're going to be able to be more congruent, right? So if somebody's looking for a particular symptom, let's say that they have a problem with, and they want to learn how to stop sneezing, let's say, right? And you've got an ebook on how to stop sneezing. There might be different reasons somebody's doing that. So maybe there's somebody who's like trying to avoid sneezing during allergy season. Then you should have an offer that's particularly sells your anti-sneezing book, you know, learn how to stop sneezing book, but it does it through that lens of allergy season. Hey, it's allergy season. Here's how you can avoid, you know, sneezing during allergy season, right? Because that's what the ad says. If it's something else because they like pepper a lot and they like cooking with pepper, but they just are trying to avoid that horrible sneezing problem that pepper causes, right? Then you can create that ad that targets that particular client group, and there's another landing pages that comes at it from that particular angle. Exact same ebook, exact same offer, but it's coming from two different angles. And so the audiences that are seeing those pages is highly, highly congruent to what they came there for, and they're more likely to actually take action and purchase the book in that particular case. And again, it all 100% comes down to congruency. How congruent is it? How well does everything match? In some markets, they call that matching the scent, by the way, matching the scent. Okay, so call to actions. Let's talk about your call to actions, your button. Is it absolutely clear what you want me to do? So I've seen people who actually on their pages don't use buttons at all. They will just use text links, right? So click here to go ahead and get started, which is okay, right? Because at least it says click here or something like that, and the text is hyperlinked and it's blue. But why not use a button? Why not make it impossibly clear as to what needs to happen now, what action you want somebody to take? Can you put arrows or some sort of call out? Can you create an image that is actually maybe where the person, instead of looking directly at the person as the viewer, kind of a head-on shot, their eyes are looking down and to the left because that's where the button is, or maybe their fingers are pointed that direction or something like that, something that draws attention to what action you want them to take. A lot of people will bury their buttons, right? And they do this under brand standards. They do this under, well, we want it to blend in. We want it to look really good. Well, there's a difference between making it look good and making it effective sometimes, right? The two are not always completely separate from each other. Sometimes they are, right? Because you really, basically, you want your buttons to be a little more contrast. You want them to have the ability to stand out in the page, right? It's called they call the squint test. So if you can kind of step back a few feet from your monitor and squint looking at your page, can you still see what it is that you should be doing? Right? Or can you at least guess and kind of go like, okay, well, I can see that there's something over on the lower right. I should be probably taking action there. If you can't see that, then it's not as apparent as it could be. And that's where you go back, and again, you can change with different, arrow call to actions or other symbols, different button styles, all that sort of stuff to get attention to those, to make it unbelievably clear what the person needs to do. The other low-hanging fruit here we talked about a little bit with images. Now, images, it's just nice little tricks you can do with eyes, right? So when somebody, and if you ever do this for yourself, if you're taking pictures of yourself because you're promoting something that you've created, whenever you do that, when you get headshots done, always make sure you have headshots where you're looking up and to the left, up and to the right, to the left, to the right, down to the left, down to the right, and then top and bottom. So you get all the different directions of where your eyes can go. This is useful because you can ultimately place those images, instead of you just smiling and happily looking out into space where you're seeing the visitor, quote unquote, on the page, you can actually make those images work harder by having your eyes gaze toward a particular part of the page. Now, this is kind of an interesting little human tidbit, but eyes will naturally go where eyes naturally go. What I mean by that is when you look at a picture of somebody looking down to the left, you cannot help but look at what they're looking at, because we're just social animals that way. We want to make sure that whatever they're looking at can't hurt us, right? And so we're going to go through there and we're going to naturally sort of see what it is that they are paying attention to. And so it's like, okay, great, that's what they're paying attention to. Can I use that in some way, right? Can this hurt me or can this help me? That's, again, this is that whole pain pleasure principle. Can this hurt me or can this help me? And you've already got the battle won when they see your call to action, right? When they see where you want them to pay attention to. So are those images supporting that? Now, the other thing I see a lot are people just randomly throw images around, but they're not necessarily tied directly to the copy where the images are. So they just have people, let's say you have an app and they have people using a mobile app, right? So random people of like stock photos, right? Things where people are just randomly using images of a mobile application. Great, but does that help? Is it related to the copy? Does it actually help you support your message? Does it support the copy that's on your message? So if it's talking about how easy this thing is to use, then is that really doing that, right? Is it talking about maybe using it anywhere, and then you've got pictures of people using it as they're skydiving or whatever? Okay, maybe that works. But if you just sort of randomly have that around because it's a mobile app and you got people on a mobile phone, that's not, I don't think that's enough of a tie-in. You would need to go back and do some screenshots or do some close-ups or again, find better images for the copies. So that actually, again, support the copy. That's the big deal about images. And if the image doesn't support the copy, just take out the image. Images will not destroy conversions. They can help conversions and they can technically hurt a little bit. But if your conversions are ridiculously bad, it's not the image's fault. Chances are it's your actual offer, or it's the copy, it's the hook, the angle, things like that. So you'd want to start there. So images can, of course, help, right? They can give you a little bit of a bump. And the more that they're tied into the actual copy or messaging around them, the better it is that they should be able to help. So those are some things you'd want to test as well to improve your own conversions. All right, so there's some low-hanging fruit here. Just want to leave you with some split testing tools. As always, these are not anything that we ever say ever. Even if we accidentally say one day, you must use an orange button because orange buttons always convert, which we never will. But if we ever did, you still want to test that, right? You still want to test that. So use something like, VWO Optimizely, Google Analytics. So you can set up split tests. They are very, very cheap. Again, we use Visual Website Optimizer, highly recommend that. Very easy to use, very easy to set up. There is no excuse to not be split testing these ideas, right? And so you can split test them and you can learn from them. So if you're trying to do a consistent call to action where you've got one that's sort of your control, and maybe you have like 3 or 4 different offers on that page and you didn't realize. And so then you create one that's a variation that just has the one offer and it really just emphasizes that offer and then de-emphasizes the other offers, right? Or puts them in some sort of lower footer navigation or something like that. Test that. See if that actually gets you the response you want. It may not, right? In which case you need to try that a different way to kind of learn your market. So it's very, very important you test everything. At the end of the day, conversions isn't about convincing. It's about getting out of the way. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. I think they start with conversions of how do we convince somebody to take action? And the answer is you can't. For the most part, somebody's going to take action from the very start. And your job, like your customer, your ideal customer, they hit the second they hit that page, actually right before they hit that page, they're going to buy. Your job is to get out of their way and to make it easy for them to buy. And I know that's a different way of looking at things. Because a lot of times we're talking about sales and marketing and copy and how do we convince people, blah, blah, blah. You don't convince them. You just make sure not to get in their way. There was a gentleman by the name of Brian Massey. He's called the Conversion Scientist, and he did a great presentation years and years ago when I first met him. He's actually in Austin. He's a friend of mine. One of the first things when I first met him, he did this presentation, which I thought was brilliant. And it was basically this. He would start out and he would say, okay, let's talk about how to build the perfect converting landing page. And he goes, here's what you need to do. And he goes, button. And that button, it was like, click here. Or it actually just was a button. That was it. It's like, okay, well, there's a button, but we're not really sure what the button needs to do. So now let's add the words click here. Okay, so now we know we want to click here on the button, but what does the button actually allow us to do, right? Or what is it actually going to do? Is it going to sell us something, or what exactly is it? Okay, well, let's put a headline or let's put a little description maybe about the button that talks about what the offer is. Okay, well, how do I know this is really for me? Well, let's put a headline that then offers that. And he sort of built all these little components, but essentially what he's doing is he's starting with the bare minimal messaging that you need to make sure that your customer understands this is for them without putting any of these other confusing or distracting elements in the way that could put seeds of doubt in their head, right? And so your job, again, just get out of the way. If you start raising things like, oh yeah, it's absolutely easy to get your money back, all you need to do is call our toll-free number, right? Man, so I got to call a number. That means I got to talk to somebody. That means I'm going to get a sales pitch. That's what's going to happen, right? I'm going to try to refund your product, and I'm going to get a sales pitch. That's going to try to, make me hold on to the product. Now, even if that's true, you don't talk about that 800 number then. Just take that out, right? Just say, hey, it's a simple email or something like that. And maybe the email's got instructions to call the 800 number, whatever it is. But you can see how that 800 number could cause some anxiety, right? They're thinking about all this different thing, and what was a customer for you is now no longer a customer for you because you gave them a reason to not be a customer. So again, conversions isn't about convincing, it's about getting out of the way, just letting your customers buy. All right, so what was your one idea? Was it the low-hanging fruit? Some of the low-hanging fruit ideas around headlines or images or the call to actions? Was it the framework? That whole, can this hurt or can this help, right? It's pain versus pleasure. It always comes down to those two things, that framework. Was it about getting out of the way? Because a lot of people don't think about conversions in terms of that, and that can help you simplify a lot. So instead of always going back to your copy and adding elements as to why people might want to buy it, you just remove elements as to what might cause people to not, and then put in elements that would make sure that your customers, the people who are going to buy anyway, that they should be seeing that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, as always, action brings results. So just take one of those things, practice that, and then come back and watch the video again and go for another one. We are about to go ahead and end the official content portion. I'll jump into the Insiders Club here to answer any questions you have. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat room. We actually got a bunch of pre-recorded or pre-entered questions that came through earlier this week, so we're going to cover those as well. But if you are not part of our Insiders Club and you want to join this portion of the show, it's free to do. All you need to do is go to SeriouslySimpleMarketing.com. You will see a way to sign up there. And we look forward to seeing you again. Completely free service. And with that, we will bring the content portion of today's show to a close. This has been Digital Marketing This Week, episode 40, A Marketer's Guide to Conversions. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next week.